paid more than $70,000. Ron Paul's campaign manager was a young man named Jesse Benton. He was charged and convicted on conspiracy and other charges for that brazen bribery scheme to win the Iowa caucuses in 2012. Well, tonight it is Jesse Benton and one of his convicted accomplices in that crime who have full pardons. And you don't have to speculate. In his weird way, President Trump has gone out of his way to tell us who arranged this pardon, to tell us in this case that the pardon was supported by none other than Ron Paul's senator son, Rand Paul. Rand Paul has been, of course, publicly entertaining the idea of becoming the Republican senator who would be needed in the Congress to join with Trump-supporting Republican members of the House to sabotage the electoral vote count that proved that to formalize the fact that Joe Biden beat Trump in the presidential election. Rand Paul has been publicly ruminating about how he might be the senator to join in that contest, to join in that effort to screw up the electoral vote count. And apparently at that same time, he's been advocating for a pardon for the guy who helped bribe his dad into better political prospects in the 2012 Republican presidential primary. See, it's all very clean. It's all the best people. And definitely everybody who's telling Donald Trump what he wants to tell, what he wants to hear right now about how he didn't really lose the election. And there's definitely ways that he could definitely get a second term. And this whole Biden one thing is all a ruse. And what else would you like to hear from me, Mr. President? It's definitely not the case that a lot of those people might need pardons or want to arrange them for their friends and family and cronies. Donald Trump is president for 28 more days, but who's counting? Joining us once again tonight is Andrew Weissmann, former senior member of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team. He served as FBI General Counsel. He was the former head of the criminal fraud section at the Justice Department. I should tell you that Mr. Weissmann led the prosecution of Paul Manafort, president's campaign chairman, one of the people who was pardoned tonight by the president. Andrew Weissmann, I didn't expect to have you on speed dial by late 2020, but I probably should have seen this coming. Thank you for joining us once again tonight and again on short notice.
I'm sorry to be here.
Last night, we talked about two figures in the Russia investigation who both lied to investigators about their contacts with people who were connected to the Russian effort to try to help Donald Trump into the White House in 2016. Pardons last night for George Papadopoulos and for Alex van der Zwaan. Tonight, a pardon for the president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. As the person who led that prosecution, I sort of just want to give you the floor here to respond a little bit.
I think what you're seeing, whether it's the pardon of Paul Manafort or many others that we saw today and yesterday, is this is what you get if you give the pardon power to a mob boss. You'd see exactly what's going on now. And we all know, as we're sitting here talking, that the next shoe to drop is going to be pardons for his family and for himself. So the one thing I'd like your viewers to know with respect to Paul Manafort is at least he did do 2 years in jail because the judge did remand him because, if you remember, he tampered with 2 witnesses while he was out on bail, which was sort of shocking. And so he started serving his jail sentence a while ago. And the other is anticipating what happened here. When he pled guilty in the district court in D.C., we had the forfeiture be both criminal and civil. And that's because you can't pardon your way out of a civil forfeiture. So the tens of millions of dollars that the Justice Department is entitled to, that should still stand. So, you know, there's only so much that the president can do.
That's a fascinating point about the forfeiture, because it was tens of millions of dollars that he was forced to forfeit, knowing that he won't get that back, even though his federal prison time will be wiped away, is important. You know, a number of people I got to sort of, I had a bunch of sources and people in the legal world sort of present themselves to me tonight upon this news of the pardon for Paul Manafort. And what everybody wanted me to note, what everybody was sort of informing me, even though I know this, but it's making me realize maybe I don't understand the importance of it in this case, is the Fifth Amendment issue. That the pardon removes the stain of a conviction, but a pardoned person, once a person has been pardoned for specific crimes, they can't escape having to testify about anything that comes within the scope of their pardon in the future. And lots of like ex-prosecutors and people who have been big legal muckety-mucks keep telling me that this is important when it comes to Paul Manafort. I understand it as a technical matter, but I don't really understand why it might be important here moving forward. Can you help me understand that?
Absolutely. So, this is the kind of thing when I hear this news, I put on my sort of former Brooklyn prosecutor hat of, okay, what can we do? And there are actually two things that the next attorney general can do with respect to the president, because the president has a very, very broad power to pardon, but he cannot pardon in exchange for something. In other words, there cannot be a bribe or a quid pro quo. So we talked last night about the pardon for Esformis, this major healthcare fraud defendant. And there you sort of really question, how did that happen? And the next attorney general can look into whether Trump or anyone else did this as a quid pro quo. Was there something, some money, for instance, would be the classic case. Second, the president may not be able to pardon himself. I'm sure he's going to try to do it. But, the president faces criminal exposure for obstruction of the Mueller investigation. And what we're seeing in the last few days is basically a confession. This is such strong evidence of obstruction. He's carrying out the dangled pardons that you referred to, he is now carrying out in real time. And one of the things that you can do as a federal prosecutor is you can put Paul Manafort and Roger Stone into the grand jury and ask them questions. And obviously you would wait until January 20th so that the president can't interfere with this. And you can ask them questions about what were your communications with the White House? Why did you lie for the president? A whole series of questions. Now, if Paul Manafort or Roger Stone were to assert the Fifth Amendment at that point, and they may have a colorable argument for it, you can just immunize them and force them to testify. You'll be no worse off than you are now. But the idea here is that the president cannot necessarily pardon himself out of the obstruction criminal liability that he faces federally. So that, to me, is something where he may get hoisted on his own petard if you have an aggressive new attorney general in place in the Biden administration.
So even though the pardon power is plenary, if the president is giving out pardons in exchange essentially for bribes or as a way to of obstructing justice or if he's doing it as part of the commission of a crime, then retroactively he may have trouble with some of these pardons.
Yeah, and maybe the easiest way to think about it, that second piece, is the president may not be able to pardon himself. In other words, the president faces clear legal liability, in my view, for obstructing our investigation, and he may try to pardon himself. That issue of whether a president can pardon himself is undecided by the Supreme Court. And everything that he is doing now can be just additional evidence of that obstruction. And that will tee up for the Supreme Court the issue of whether the president can pardon himself or not. But I'd say President Trump has certainly created the worst possible record going before the Supreme Court to say, here's a really good reason why presidents should be able to pardon themselves, because we're seeing in real time just how outrageous it is in the way that the president is using this. You made the argument last night, which is, what if he told someone to kill somebody and then said, I'll pardon you and I'll pardon myself for that murder? That clearly cannot be what the Constitution allowed. So essentially, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and a number of other people can be put in the grand jury and asked about the president to beef up a future case against the president.
Wow. Andrew Weissmann, former senior member of Special Counsel Mueller's team, former senior official of the Justice Department and the FBI. Andrew, thank you for being here tonight. I hope I don't see you tomorrow.
Same. No offense.
All right. Exactly. None intended, none taken. I mentioned a moment ago that